His wife said, "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you. You don't even meet my standards. Stay away from me." What he did next crushed her. "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you, Art. You don't even meet my standards. Stay away from me." Those were the last words Victoria Sterling hurled at her husband Arthur Art Vance in a ballroom shimmering with false praise. She threw the words like stones before passionately kissing her lover directly in front of him, a final act of theatrical defiance. She had no idea the quiet man she just publicly castrated wasn't a lamb for the slaughter, but a slumbering lion she had just kicked awake. She didn't know that the man she humiliated had already decided, with surgical precision, exactly how her downfall would unfold. What happened next will make you rethink everything you know about respect, betrayal, and the devastating power of a quiet man's resolve. Viewers, what would you do if the person you built a life with said those exact words to you in front of the entire world? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The grand ballroom of the Omni Houston Hotel was bathed in a warm, golden light, the kind that made everything look more expensive than it already was. Constellations of crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, scattering fractured diamonds of light across champagne flutes, sequined gowns, and the polished marble floor. A soft, elegant jazz band provided a smooth, unobtrusive soundtrack, a gentle current weaving through the calculated laughter and the low hum of corporate networking. Tonight was not just another corporate gathering. It was the annual Pinnacle Awards Gala for Apex Consolidated Holdings, and tonight belonged entirely to Victoria Vicky Sterling. Her name was emblazoned in a sharp, modern font on digital banners flanking the entrance. Congratulations, Victoria Sterling, Senior Vice President of Marketing. She was the sun, and her colleagues orbited her in a tight semicircle of admiration, their voices a sycophantic chorus. "You more than earned it, Vicky. Finally, someone with teeth in that department. You're on the fast track to the C-suite, no question." Victoria soaked it all in, a monarch accepting tribute. She wore a custom emerald gown by a designer whose name was a password into elite circles. It hugged her toned physique, a declaration of discipline and ambition. Her hair was styled in immaculate waves that framed her sharp cheekbones. Red lipstick, a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light with every dismissive flick of her wrist, a Swiss watch that wasn't for telling time but for declaring status. It was all armor. Every laugh she released was calibrated to be heard, but not to be shrill. Every gesture was a deliberate performance of power. This was her stage. And her husband, Arthur Art Vance, stood quietly against the far wall, watching. Art was not the loud type. He wore a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit, not a flashy brand, but the kind of quality that whispers, not shouts. His hair was neatly cut, his beard meticulously trimmed. He looked like a man who carried a deep, unshakable calm in his bloodstream, the kind of man people perennially underestimated because he never felt the need to announce his own value. In his hand, he held a glass of still water, the ice clinking softly. He wasn't here to drink or to network. He was here to honor a promise he'd made to himself long ago. You show up for your family. You stand by them, especially on their victory nights, even if you're standing alone. He watched Victoria laugh with a group of executives, her head thrown back in performative delight. She hadn't introduced him. She hadn't looked his way since he arrived. She hadn't acknowledged his presence beyond a tight, forced half smile as he'd entered the ballroom. Still, he approached. With a quiet confidence that was entirely his own, he moved across the marble floor, weaving through clusters of chattering employees, offering polite, almost imperceptible nods. When he reached her, he touched her elbow lightly, a familiar, gentle gesture. "Vicky," he said, his voice soft but clear. "Congratulations, you look incredible." She glanced at him, the corners of her mouth lifting just enough to maintain appearances for the people watching. "Thank you," she said. The words clipped, a social formality performed for the audience around them. Her eyes had already moved on, back to her circle. Not a single person acknowledged him. She didn't introduce him. She didn't break her conversation. She treated him not as a husband, but as a familiar piece of furniture she'd forgotten was in the room. A familiar ache pressed against his ribs. He swallowed it. "Can we dance?" he asked. "Just one?" A flicker of annoyance crossed her face, quickly masked by a smile as thin as a razor's edge. Her coworkers turned, their eyes gleaming with amused curiosity. She couldn't refuse without appearing rude on her big night. She forced a gracious smile. "Sure, why not?" Her tone had all the warmth of a cold morgue slab. They walked onto the dance floor as the band shifted into a slow, romantic tune. Other couples joined them, swaying gently under the opulent glow of the chandeliers. Art placed his hands on her waist. She stiffened instantly, her body rigid in his hold. He ignored the sting, focusing on the reason he was here. To support her, to celebrate her, to remember the team they were supposed to be. He leaned in, a small, intimate gesture, intending to press a quiet kiss to her cheek. But Victoria jerked her head away. The movement was so sharp, so violent, it startled the couple dancing beside them. Her voice, sharp and laced with venom, cut through the music, loud enough for the nearest tables to overhear. "Art, don't!" He blinked, pulling back slightly. "I was just..." She took a half step back, creating a chasm between them on the dance floor. People stopped swaying. The gentle rhythm of the room stuttered to a halt. All eyes were on them. Victoria placed a dramatic hand on her hip, her posture screaming indignation. She raised her voice, ensuring everyone was a witness to his transgression. "God, Art, seriously," she declared. "I'd rather kiss my dog than kiss you right now." A wave of laughter rippled out from the dance floor, sharp, sudden, and cruel. Someone near the bar shouted, "Damn!" Art's ears rang. His body went still, a statue in the center of a storm. He didn't step back. He didn't lash out. He didn't argue. He simply stood there, his posture unflinching, his gaze locked on hers. His heart didn't break. It solidified. The pain was a distant echo, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. He wasn't thinking about the sting of her words. He was calculating the cost. Her cost. In that instant, an internal ledger snapped shut. A final entry was made. The account was now closed. She doesn't know what she just signed, he thought, his mind already 3 steps ahead. This is the end. Inspiration. Victoria wasn't finished. She was never finished until she was sure she had won. She flipped her hair back, her voice now dripping with performative contempt. "You don't even meet my standards," she announced, delivering the line like a punchline she'd rehearsed in the mirror for months. "Stay away from me, Art." The laughter doubled, sharp and unrestrained. A few people covered their mouths in performative shock. Most didn't bother. Art exhaled, a slow, controlled release of air meant not to calm himself, but to oxygenate his thoughts. He looked at Victoria, really looked at her, and saw a complete stranger wearing his wife's face. But beneath the sting of humiliation, something inside him didn't break. It solidified. It wasn't rage. It wasn't embarrassment. It was resolve, cold and absolute. He straightened his posture, his eyes calm, his breath steady. He was no longer a husband being humiliated. He was an architect assessing a structure that had just revealed a fatal flaw, a structure that now had to be demolished. The band, sensing the catastrophic shift in the room's atmosphere, attempted to play louder, a desperate, jazzy attempt to plaster over the gaping wound in the evening's decorum. But the damage was done. No one was dancing. They were watching, whispering, nudging each other, their faces lit with the cruel excitement of spectators at a public execution. Victoria didn't try to walk away quietly. She thrived on spectacle. The more eyes on her, the more alive she felt. And right now, she was intoxicated by the attention, by the power she believed she was wielding. She turned to the crowd with a theatrical smirk, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "You know what?" she said, turning toward the band leader's microphone stand. "If I'm going to kiss someone tonight, it's going to be someone who actually excites me." A collective gasp swept through the room. Others leaned forward, their bodies betraying their hunger for more drama. A buzz of anticipation rippled across the ballroom. Art, still motionless on the dance floor, watched her with those unnervingly calm eyes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't begging. He was simply observing, which unsettled Victoria far more than any outburst could have. She thought humiliation would shatter him. Instead, his silence made him seem untouchable, powerful, irritated by his composure. She snapped her fingers dramatically. "Julian," she called out, her voice a sharp command. "Come join me, baby." Every head in the room whipped toward the entrance. A tall, handsome man in a tailored wine-colored blazer stepped into view. His stride was confident. His smile was smug. Julian Croft. Square jaw, expensive haircut, and a Patek Philippe on his wrist that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. He wasn't an employee of Apex Consolidated Holdings. He wasn't part of Victoria's corporate circle. He was a partner at a rival firm, a man she had been seeing behind Art's back for months. And tonight, Victoria had decided to detonate her secret in the most public way possible, just to prove she could. Julian strode toward her with a conqueror's smirk, straightening his blazer as if preparing for a victory photograph. The sheer audacity of the act sent a ripple of disbelief through the crowd. Victoria grabbed Julian by the tie, pulled him close, and kissed him not a peck, but a deep, passionate kiss, designed to be seen, to be photographed, to be remembered as the moment she burned her old life to the ground. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised, their screens glowing like 100 tiny spotlights on her rebellion. Laughter and shocked whispers spilled around them like broken glass. But as Victoria's lips pressed against another man's, Art Vance went still, so profoundly still that the world around him seemed to slow to a crawl. The jazz music faded into a distant hum. Conversations muted. The brilliant ballroom lights softened into a blur. And in that strange, suspended moment of ultimate betrayal, a memory a lifetime opened inside him. It began with his mother, Eleanor. He could still see her hands, thin and chapped from years of scrubbing floors, wiping down diner counters, and cleaning the messes of strangers. Hands that held his face with a gentleness that defied the harshness of her world. Eleanor Vance, too young and too hopeful, had been punished for loving the wrong man and for carrying a child her wealthy, influential family refused to accept. "Get out," her father had commanded, his voice like the slam of a vault door. "You are no daughter of mine." The door of their family estate had shut behind her, and she never walked back through it. Art watched his mother work herself into a state of perpetual exhaustion, moving through a series of cheap motels, greasy spoon diners, and steaming laundromats. Yet every night, she smiled at him, as if she hadn't spent the day wiping away other people's filth. "You're my miracle, Arthur," she'd always say, her rough fingers brushing the hair from his forehead. "One day, you'll build something beautiful." He remembered the bone-chilling winters, sleeping on worn-out couches that smelled of dust and defeat. He remembered helping her count her meager tips on their small kitchen table late at night, the coins cold against his small fingers. He remembered her humming old songs to hide the sound of her quiet, desperate crying in the next room. And then, he remembered her death. The hospital hallway smelled of antiseptic and grief. She held his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Don't ever hate them, Arthur," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Just live better than they ever did. Build your own world, sweetheart, your own foundation." She died with his name on her lips. At her funeral, Art stood alone, truly alone. No relatives, no family friends, just the raw memory of her love and the echoing weight of her sacrifices. Months later, a letter arrived, embossed with a family crest he vaguely recognized. Then a phone call from a lawyer with a low, serious voice. Then a black car sent to pick him up. Her family, his grandparents, were old now, frail and shrouded in a grim fog of regret. In a sterile, wood-paneled office, they confessed everything. The shame, the guilt, the long, empty years spent wondering where their only daughter had gone, whether she was alive, whether she had ever forgiven them. They wanted to make amends before death claimed them. Their repentance came with a paper trail, wills, property titles, and corporate documents for a company called Apex Consolidated Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar empire, a family legacy. In that conference room, surrounded by stone-faced lawyers, his grandparents transferred every single share, every last vestige of their control, to him. Their guilt had crystallized into ownership. He was 24 years old. The board wanted him as chairman. He refused. "I'm an architectural designer," he'd said, his voice quiet but firm. "I want to build things with my hands. I want a life that looks like mine, not yours. You can run the company. I'll remain in the shadows." And so, for the next 10 years, he had. He lived quietly, deliberately, peacefully creating, designing, building the kind of solid, respectable life his mother had always wanted for him. No one knew his net worth. No one knew his influence. No one knew he could bring the entire executive floor of Apex to its knees with a single, quiet phone call. Not even Victoria. Especially not Victoria. Is this truth? The present came roaring back as Victoria moaned into Julian's mouth, clutching his blazer. The ballroom erupted in a cacophony of cheers, whistles, and cruel laughter. Every sound was a nail, being driven deeper into the coffin of their marriage. Art blinked, the memories of his mother settling inside him not as grief, but as armor. He didn't feel heartbreak. He felt a profound, chilling clarity. It was the same clarity he'd felt when he inherited the power to make or break an empire. The same clarity that came with the promise he'd made to his mother's memory. He would never allow anyone, family, enemy, or wife, to disrespect the life he had bled to build. Victoria finally pulled away from Julian's lips. Her designer lipstick smudged, her chest rising and falling, with the cheap thrill of the humiliation she believed she'd inflicted. She expected to see Art shattered, a broken man ready to flee. She found him calm, a calm so absolute it chilled the air around him. He slowly reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out his phone. The people closest to them judged his silence incorrectly. They whispered, their words laced with pity and scorn. "He's going to cry. Look, he's calling a friend to come get him. How pathetic. He's completely embarrassed." They didn't know the truth. They were watching a man load a weapon. Art unlocked his phone with a quiet swipe. He found a single contact in his favorites, labeled only HR Director. He pressed call. Victoria scoffed, her voice loud and mocking. "Who are you calling, Art? Your mother?" He raised the phone to his ear. His eyes locked on hers, his expression as unreadable as polished granite. The call connected. A professional woman's voice answered. "Hello?" In a voice steady enough to slice marble, Art said 5 words that changed everything. "I want Victoria Sterling's employment terminated." A beat. Effective immediately. Gasps burst around the room. He didn't shout. He didn't explain. He didn't justify. He simply hung up and slipped the phone back into his pocket with the deliberate silence of a man who had just awakened a power he had spent 10 years hiding. The ballroom held its breath. Art Vance wasn't reacting to humiliation. He was ending an era. The air buzzed with a raw, nervous disbelief. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses, their earlier mockery replaced with confusion. Some laughed awkwardly, certain it had to be a desperate drunken bluff. Others stared at Art with wide, uncertain eyes. Victoria blinked rapidly, her mind struggling to process his audacity. She tried to laugh it off. "You're unbelievable," she sneered, brushing her hair back as if swatting away a bad joke. "You really think you're some kind of big shot?" Her voice faltered because Art wasn't looking at her anymore. He wasn't looking at Julian. He was standing with the profound stillness of a judge who had already delivered the sentence, calm, in control, and completely detached from the chaos he knew was coming. The ballroom erupted in a fresh wave of whispers. What did he say? He fired her? He must be drunk. He's an architectural designer. He doesn't have that kind of power. Wait, was that the direct line to HR? Victoria forced another laugh, louder this time, manic around the edges. "Everyone relax," she announced, waving her hand dismissively. "Art likes his theatrics. He's just a designer, nothing more. Just a designer." That phrase landed like dust on stone. Art didn't flinch. He simply watched the room behave exactly as people do when they smell blood. Some guests laughed nervously. Others began to subtly move away from Victoria, as if her proximity had suddenly become toxic. A few, the more astute ones, looked at Art with a dawning, fearful respect. Julian Croft cleared his throat, attempting to salvage the spotlight. "Babe," he whispered to Victoria, his own confidence beginning to fray. "Maybe we should just go." "No," she snapped, her pride refusing to yield. "He's trying to embarrass me. I'm not giving him the satisfaction." And as the nervous laughter rippled around them, Art's mind slipped back again, not in surrender, but into the bedrock of truth she had never bothered to excavate. The memory came like a tidal wave. The first time Victoria applied for a junior marketing position at Apex Consolidated Holdings, she was rejected. The email was polite but firm. "While your resume is impressive, we have decided to move forward with other candidates who more closely match our current needs." She had come home shattered, crying, angry, frustrated, calling the company a soulless machine for overlooking her obvious potential. Art held her as she sobbed into his chest. "They didn't even give me an interview, Art," she cried. "They said I don't have enough experience." He had stayed silent, not because he didn't care, but because he had already designed the solution. The next morning, he walked into the gleaming skyscraper of Apex headquarters, the same building she believed had scorned her. He bypassed the main lobby, using a private keycard to access a secure elevator. The security guards knew him by sight. Nodding respectfully, "Mr. Vance." The elevator opened directly onto the executive floor. He strode into the boardroom where the directors, mid-meeting, rose to greet him. The chairman, a man named Caldwell, smiled warmly. "Arthur, to what do we owe the pleasure?" Art placed her resume on the massive mahogany table. "I want her employed," he said, his voice quiet but absolute. "Entry level. Let her earn the rest." They didn't question him. They didn't hesitate. They simply obeyed. Victoria received a surprising call back the very next day. An interview. A second chance she believed she had willed into existence through sheer talent. He remembered waiting for her across the street, leaning against his car, ready to celebrate her victory. When she emerged from the building beaming, convinced she had won them over, and he didn't correct her. He wanted her to grow. He wanted her to feel capable. He helped her climb every single rung of that ladder. While she was loosening the bolts under his feet, he was reinforcing the structure beneath hers. He remembered her first promotion, how she bragged to friends that her boss had finally recognized her brilliance. She never knew the truth. She never knew that Art had walked into another board meeting, slid her performance stats across the table, and said, "She deserves more. Give her a shot." The board voted yes, because the silent owner had made a request. Her salary bumps came from directives he signed off on quietly. Her new corner office existed because he had personally approved the renovation budget for that entire floor. Every step upward she credited to her own charm, her own wit, her own ruthless ambition, had been built on a foundation he laid for her in the shadows. And now she stood in a ballroom built by his family's legacy, humiliating him, calling him beneath her, telling him he didn't meet her standards. He stayed silent because the truth was a conversation she had never earned the right to have. In fruition, the memory burned through him like a controlled fire. He inhaled deeply and looked at her, not with anger, not with pain, but with the silent recognition of a man who was finally seeing the truth with unveiled eyes. She had never loved him. She loved what he provided. She loved the reflection he held up for her, not the man holding the mirror. The presence snapped back into focus around him. Julian Croft had vanished from her side, melting back into the shadows. The guests still whispered, their faces a mixture of confusion and morbid curiosity. Victoria stood stiffly, arms crossed, a desperate attempt to hide her trembling hands. "You can't do anything, Art," she hissed, her voice low and shaky. "You're just embarrassing yourself. You have no power here." Art blinked slowly. Then, with a calm, steady, and final motion, he reached for his phone again. The ballroom watched, a new wave of speculation washing over the crowd. What is he doing now? He's calling someone else. This guy's really losing his mind. He actually thinks he's the CEO. Art dialed the second number, and, this time, he put it on speaker. The phone connected instantly. "This is Caldwell," the authoritative voice of the chairman answered. "Who is—" "It's Arthur," Art said simply. A silence so profound it felt like a physical crackle spread across the ballroom. Then, the chairman's voice changed completely. It straightened, shedding its corporate authority for something else entirely. Deference. Respect. "Sir," Chairman Caldwell said, "my apologies. I didn't recognize the number." Victoria's heart didn't just drop, it plummeted. "I want every board member at the Pinnacle Gala within 30 minutes, Art said, his voice quiet but carrying the undeniable weight of command. "Yes, sir. Immediately," the chairman replied, without a flicker of hesitation. Art ended the call. The ballroom froze. Just then, Victoria's phone buzzed. Once, then again, then a third time. The sound was small, barely audible, beneath the stunned murmurs of the crowd, but its timing was catastrophic. She tried to ignore it, but the phone buzzed harder, an urgent, persistent vibration against her thigh. With a frustrated huff, she pulled her phone from her clutch. The screen lit her face. The caller ID was a death sentence. HR Director, Apex Consolidated Holdings. Her smile died. The vibrant color drained from her cheeks, leaving her face a ghastly shade of pale under the warm ballroom lights. Her chest tightened as she slowly, reluctantly pressed the green button. "Hello?" she managed, her voice a reedy whisper. The room remained utterly silent, waiting. Guests leaned in. Some took a step closer. The HR director's voice, though tinny through the phone speaker, was loud enough for those closest to hear the words spilling out like acid. "Victoria, this call is to inform you that, as per an executive directive, your employment with Apex Consolidated Holdings has been terminated, effective immediately. Your access to all company property and systems has been revoked." Victoria trembled so violently her phone nearly slipped from her grasp. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in frantic denial. No. This has to be a mistake. What are you talking about? I was just promoted." Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. "He did it. He actually fired her. What is happening? This can't be real. Who is he?" Victoria staggered backward, bumping into a marble-topped table. Her mind scrambled to make sense of the impossible. The ballroom was humming with an attention so sharp it felt like electricity crawling through the air. Every guest could sense that something irreversible had just happened. They didn't understand why the chairman had addressed Art as Sir. They didn't know why this quiet architectural designer had the authority to summon the entire board. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a meltdown. This was power. Raw, hidden power, wearing a quiet man's face. The great oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. Two men in tailored black suits, Apex's executive security, stepped in first. They scanned the room with precise, professional movements, their earpieces glowing a faint blue. A woman near the entrance gasped. Someone dropped a champagne flute, the sound of shattering glass echoing in the dead silence. Behind the security team came the chairman. Mr. Caldwell, a man most employees saw only in annual reports, walked in briskly. He was flanked by the directors, the CFO, senior advisors, the entire Mount Olympus of Apex Consolidated Holdings. They wore stern, focused expressions. They didn't look surprised. They looked summoned. They approached the center of the ballroom where Art stood. Then, the unthinkable happened. In front of Victoria, in front of every guest, in front of the dozens of phones that were now recording every second of this corporate apocalypse, Chairman Caldwell stopped directly in front of Arthur Vance and bowed his head slightly, a gesture of profound respect. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice resonating with deference, "we came as quickly as we could." The entire ballroom recoiled in a collective wave of shock. Gasps, frantic whispers, wide eyes, hands covering mouths. Julian Croft, half hidden behind a pillar, stood frozen in abject horror. Art simply nodded once. "Thank you for coming, Caldwell." The other board members followed suit, offering their own respectful greetings. "Mr. Vance, sir." "Good evening, Mr. Vance." Victoria's knees buckled. She stumbled forward, her hand slapping against a table to stop her fall. "No," she whimpered. "No, this can't be real." Mr. Caldwell turned respectfully toward Art. "We are ready to discuss whatever matter you require, sir." Art gestured calmly toward the trembling woman who was still, technically, his wife. "It concerns her." All eyes shifted. Victoria felt the weight of their stares like fire on her skin. The chairman continued, his tone clinical. "The HR director has already acted, as per the ownership directive. The termination letter is in her email. Her corporate accounts are locked. Security is en route to her office to pack her personal belongings." Victoria collapsed to her knees. "No, please," she begged, looking not at Art, but at the chairman. "Mr. Caldwell." "Sir, I didn't know. I didn't know who he was." She crawled the short distance between them and grabbed Art's pant leg, her meticulously manicured nails digging into the fine wool. "Art, please, baby, please. I swear I didn't mean any of it. It was just a joke. I was drunk. Please, forgive me, please." He stepped back. Her hand slipped off him like water. He looked down at her, not with hatred, but with the dispassionate gaze of a judge looking at a verdict he had already accepted. "You didn't know who I was," he said, his voice devoid of all warmth, "because you never cared enough to ask." She sobbed harder, clutching her chest. "I'll do anything, Art. Anything. Just don't ruin me." He leveled his gaze on her, unblinking, cold, done. "You ruined yourself." He paused, letting the words sink in before delivering the final crushing blow. "And you didn't work for any of it. I built every single step for you. I got you into this company. I got you every promotion. I fought for you behind the scenes while you mocked me in public." Her sobs turned into choked screams of disbelief. "No, no!" Her last shred of dignity evaporated. She grabbed his trousers again, her tears streaking the polished marble floor. "Art, please, I'm begging you, don't leave me. Don't do this." He looked down at her, and this time, there was no hesitation, no softness, no trace of the man who once carried her dreams on his back. He spoke sharply, clearly. each word a final judgment. You'll hear from my lawyer. He let that hang in the air for a moment. And don't think you're getting a dime. The prenup stands. It's ironclad. Her eyes widened in horror. Her mouth fell open, her voice dying in her throat. He leaned just slightly closer, his final words delivered with surgical precision for her ears only. You invoked the infidelity clause the moment you kissed another man in front of me. He straightened his jacket, lifted his chin, and walked toward the exit. The board members parted for him like the Red Sea. He walked like the king he truly was, not the shadow she had made him. Art! She screamed, pounding the floor with her fist. Art! He didn't stop. He didn't look back. The ballroom watched in stunned silence as the quiet man they had all overlooked walked out with absolute power and dignity, leaving the woman who mocked him shattered and broken on the floor, a queen dethroned in the very palace she thought she had conquered. This blew from low stair. The ballroom was humming with an attention so sharp it felt like electricity crawling through the air. Every guest could sense that something irreversible had been set in motion. They didn't understand why the chairman had addressed Art as Sir. They didn't know why this quiet architectural designer had the authority to summon the entire board. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a meltdown. This was power. Raw, hidden power, wearing a quiet man's face. Victoria stood there trembling, her expensive mascara beginning to smear as she fought to keep her composure. She opened her mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. Her lips quivered like a child trying to hold back a scream. People stared, whispers rolling like waves through the ballroom. Why would the chairman call him Sir? Who is he? This is bigger than marriage drama. Oh God, what did she do? Victoria finally found her voice, a desperate, reedy plea. Art, please, you didn't mean that call, did you? You didn't mean it. He didn't look at her. He looked at his watch. 10 minutes had passed. As if on cue, the grand oak doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. 2 men in tailored black suits, Apex's executive security, stepped inside first. They scanned the room with precise, professional movements, their earpieces glowing a faint blue. A woman near the entrance gasped. Someone dropped a champagne flute, the sound of shattering glass echoing in the dead silence. Behind the security team came the chairman, Mr. Caldwell, a man most employees saw only in annual reports, walked in briskly. He was flanked by the directors, the CFO, senior advisors, the entire mount. Olympus of Apex Consolidated Holdings. They wore stern, focused expressions. They didn't look surprised. They looked summoned. They approached the center of the ballroom where Art stood. Then, the unthinkable happened. In front of Victoria, in front of every guest, in front of the dozens of phones that were now recording every second of this corporate apocalypse, Chairman Caldwell stopped directly in front of Arthur Vance and bowed his head slightly. It was not a gesture of greeting. It was a gesture of profound respect, of fealty. Mr. Vance, he said, his voice resonating with deference. We came as quickly as we could. The entire ballroom recoiled in a collective wave of shock. Gasps, frantic whispers, wide eyes, hands covering mouths. Julian Croft, half hidden behind a pillar, stood frozen in abject horror, realizing he had picked a fight with a god. Art simply nodded once. Thank you for coming, Caldwell. The other board members followed suit, their voices a chorus of respect. Mr. Vance, sir. Good evening, Mr. Vance. Victoria's knees buckled. She stumbled forward, her hand slapping against a table to stop her fall. No, she whimpered, shaking her head. No, no, no. This can't be real. Mr. Caldwell turned respectfully toward Art. We are ready to discuss whatever matter you require, sir. Art gestured calmly toward the trembling woman who was still, technically, his wife. It concerns her. All eyes shifted to Victoria. She felt the weight of their stares like fire on her skin. The chairman's tone became clinical, devoid of emotion. The HR director has already acted, as per the ownership directive. The termination letter is in her email. Her corporate accounts are locked. Security is en route to her office to pack her personal belongings. Victoria collapsed to her knees, the sound of her body hitting the marble floor a dull, final thud. "No, please," she begged, looking not at Art, but at the chairman. "Mr. Caldwell, sir. I didn't know. I didn't know who he was." She crawled the short distance between them and grabbed Art's pant leg, her meticulously manicured nails digging into the fine wool. Her voice was a ragged, pathetic wail. "Art, please, baby, please. I swear I didn't mean any of it. It was just a joke. I was possessed. The devil used me. Please, forgive me, please." He stepped back. Her hand slipped off him like water. He looked down at her, not with hatred, but with the dispassionate gaze of a judge looking at a verdict he had already accepted. "You didn't know who I was," he said, his voice devoid of all warmth, "because you never cared enough to ask. I was convenient, useful, good enough to fund your life, support your ambition, and build your career, but never enough to respect." She sobbed harder, clutching her chest. "I'll do anything, Art, anything. Just don't ruin me." He leveled his gaze on her, unblinking, cold, done. "You ruined yourself." He paused, letting the words sink in before delivering the final, crushing truth. "And you didn't work for any of it. I built every single step for you. I got you into this company. I got you every promotion. I fought for you behind the scenes while you mocked me in public." Her sobs turned into choked screams of disbelief. No, that's not true." Her last shred of dignity evaporated. She grabbed his trousers again, her tears streaking the polished marble floor. "Art, please, I'm begging you. Don't leave me. Don't do this." He looked down at her, and this time there was no hesitation, no softness, no trace of the man who once carried her dreams on his back. He spoke sharply, clearly, each word a final judgment. "You'll hear from my lawyer." She gasped, shaking. "Art, no, please." He cut her off. "And don't think you're getting a dime." Her eyes widened in horror. "The prenup stands. It's ironclad." She froze. Her mouth fell open, her voice dying in her throat. But he wasn't finished. He leaned just slightly closer, his final words delivered with surgical precision. "You invoked the infidelity clause the moment you kissed another man in front of me." He straightened his jacket, lifted his chin, and turned to leave. The board members parted for him like the Red Sea. He walked toward the exit, a king leaving his court, not the shadow she had made him. "Art!" she screamed, pounding the floor with her fist. "Art!" He didn't stop. He didn't look back. The ballroom watched in stunned silence as the quiet man they had all overlooked walked out with absolute power and dignity. He left behind the woman who mocked him, a shattered and broken queen, sobbing on the floor of the very palace she thought she had conquered. Viewers, if you were in Art's shoes, what would you have done? Do you think Victoria deserved a second chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories where the truth is always more powerful than the lie.